And we are about to start the CISO series video chat about hacking secure cloud migration. But we start with our speed round. And I got Archie Agarwal here, and I got Ty Sabano, and they are, in 1 minute, going to address as many issues with migrating to the cloud as they possibly can. Gentlemen, are you ready? Here we go.
Shared responsibility model.
Regionality.
Developer training.
Budget management.
Lack of context and security review.
Multi-tenancy.
Policy driven.
Engineered demand for playground cloud environments.
Lift and shift.
Multi-cloud.
Security is still an afterthought.
Oh man, it really is. Federated identity.
Cross-account access.
Lack of security reviews on incremental updates.
Lack of understanding of IAM roles.
No one has any idea what changes are actually happen after it's released.
Insecure applications running in the cloud.
Container security.
No architecture diagram.
Permissions management.
Security trade-offs.
Don't forget about those lambdas. We still don't know how to secure them.
Focus on misconfigurations.
Oh, all sorts of lack of architecture diagrams and threat models.
Cloud native.
We're getting stumped now. Perfect time to get stumped.
Oh my God, I think that sounded like a record to me. Andrew, how many did we have?
Total of 25, Archie 13, Ty 12.
Archie wins. Good job.
Archie,
Let's start this.
Welcome everybody. The CISO series video chat is ready to begin.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the CISO series video chat. My name is David Spark. I am the host of the CISO series video chat and the producer of the CISO series. Today's topic is hacking secure cloud migration. You just heard 25 issues, a current record. 24 was the previous record. An hour of critical thinking on how to keep pace with the business's desire to move to the cloud. And I know many of you are doing that, if not all. Our guests, who you just saw, are Ty Sabano, the CISO with CISense, and Archie Agarwal, CEO of Threat Modeler. And a huge thanks to Threat Modeler for sponsoring this very video chat. Thank you so much, Threat Modeler, for making this happen. All right. For those of you who are regulars, of which I see a ton of regulars, take a snooze for a second. For those of you who have never been here before, there are 6 different ways you can participate. The chat room, it's already alive. Keep it going. Submit your bad ideas. So we want your bad ideas on how to migrate to the cloud securely. I feel confident that you can come up with some really horrible ones. Submit your best strategies. So you write either bad idea, or good idea or good strategy, for that. And we will address all of them. Join us on video at any time by just typing "Bring Me On," and Andrew, our producer, will try to bring as many of you on as possible. Ask a question. We're going to try to address as many of your questions as possible. And if a lot come in, I want you to vote for your favorite question so I know which one to actually pick. All right, today's schedule, the speed round, you just saw it. Your bad ideas and questions, get them in now. Poll Live will go up at 20 minutes past the hour. Vote for your favorite bad idea. Also at 20 minutes past the hour, we want to hear your best strategies, but you can get those in early. That's perfectly fine. 30 minutes past the hour, we will play the Department of Yes. Then after that, you will vote for your favorite questions. Actually, you can vote for your favorite questions all throughout. At 40 minutes past the hour, the 2 people that wrote the 2 best bad ideas at the time, for which I said that we played the Department of Yes, they will come on camera and they will defend their bad ideas. And then we'll do last question and final advice, and then we'll do our meetup. All right. For those who have never joined the meetup, it is a ton of fun. Random matchup. It's kind of like cybersecurity speed dating. So we want you to be a part of that as well. All right. Next Friday, we're going to be doing this again. And the topic is hacking purple teaming, an hour of critical thinking of how to increase collaboration between the red and the blue teams. There is a link at the bottom of your screen. You see that? It says join us next Friday. You can click that at any time during this video chat, and that will open another window, and you can register for the other video chat. It will not take you out of this. And here's the key thing. See this really cool CISO series jacket I'm wearing right now? If you register early, by next Tuesday, so you could just do it now, you are automatically entered into raffle to win one of these. We gave one away this past week. We'll give one away next week as well. And you can also win one if you come up with a really great bad idea, the one that I pick, which I don't decide until over the weekend because so many come in. All right, with that being said, let us start this discussion. And my discussion will begin with you, Ty, and because you are actually doing this. You are actually moving to the cloud. And I want to know the take that you are doing when you do this. Are you making demands like, hey, it's a business imperative, we got to move to the cloud, and everyone's dragging their heels over it? Or are you empowering your team to go to the cloud?
I think demands are very dangerous when it comes to being a security practitioner. So it's all about collaboration, right? So I've done the migratory path a few times. In my current phase, it's really around where is the demand coming from? Where are you getting that requirement to say, let's go to the cloud? If it's a generic blanket statement from an executive that doesn't understand what it is because they read the Harvard Business Review, let's take a step back and pause and understand, where are we? What are we doing? Because there may be some paths already leading there that your R&D, your engineering team have already stepped towards. But I always like to think, like, let's start with a very topical, where's our documentation? And then I look at people like Archie and I'm like, hey, Archie, do we even have a threat model get started with this conversation? Because if we don't know what we're going to move, it's a very tough chat with everyone. So Archie, like, you deal with a lot of folks out there in the world. You know, where have you seen documentation in the current state of 2021?
Less than 1%, if I can be a bit liberal with this. At the end of the day, it is like, just like Ty said, hey, we have to migrate to the cloud. So let's start with lift and shift, and let's take these existing applications and let's put them in the cloud, and then we'll figure things out. Is there an architecture diagram? Is there an understanding of the context? Is there, like, where what control needs to be put in place? That's always an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we jumped a little bit here mentioning threat modeling, and I know this is what you do, Archie. I excuse my complete ignorance here, but just connect the dots for me. Why are we thinking threat modeling? Because I don't think a lot of people do think threat modeling when they are moving to the cloud and trying to do a secure migration. So connect the dots for me.
Sure. So, like, think of it this way. Most of the companies, what they've done is that they have created these security policies, right? So they're going to create images, they're going to create these policies, and they have these CSPM tools, which is sort of like an antivirus, if you think. They have a database of policies, they go out there and they check and they say, oh, here's a policy violation. But what they overlook or what they don't see is the context. So, like, I'll give you an example from one of our customer. As they were migrating, they realized that they needed an encryption in their caching environment. Now you could go for Redis, you could go for Memcache. They build a threat model for both, and they realize that one is better than the other, and it actually provides a better control from an encryption perspective. Now, because they were able to build that threat model, they knew that, okay, this is a better control that has to be put in place. Otherwise, what? Hey, we need to do encryption. Just go and pick any, caching tool which does encryption, whether it's enough or not, you don't know. So threat modeling is key to really understand the context, to understand what controls need to be put in place, where, and what is the strength of that control that you need to put in place.
We got a question that came in already from Jacob, who asks, and I'm going to throw this to you, Ty, what should actually inform a business to move to the cloud? Like, where is that, quote, where does the imperative come from?
I'm a security guy. It just depends. And in certain situations, when your data center is not being managed well, when your IT team is the backbone of everything and no one has a good answer and there's no accountability or ownership within the organization and everyone's just like, it's IT's problem. This idea of full stack ownership, as we shift more to cloud services, we get better roles and responsibilities. We get a better RACI matrix, but I don't think that's the executive's intent, right? Like, when we look down to the tier, I think there were actually a couple of bad ideas. I think I saw one, because it's cool, because it's trendy, because we heard other people doing it. What if, like, if you're not even thinking about cost control, like, what's the point of moving to the cloud if you have a single data center and you don't have to do much work with it because you've outsourced all of that effort? What's the difference? If your executive team and your engineers don't do anything in the DCs, who cares? As opposed to if you really want to have a fast evolving deployment model, if you want that control, great. I think it all depends on your business needs. And as I'm not the CEO, I'm not the CIO, I'm here to help the business make those informed decisions. And I think that's always the challenge is as a security person, we don't make those calls.
Archie, you were saying earlier that being liberal, you were saying 1% have documentation. So may I go so far as to say you have seen an organization that has some decent documentation? Were they something of a poster child on how to do this well? And I mean, like, what did you see? Like, oh my God, if everyone did this, it'd be amazing. Or you didn't see anything that good?
No. So look, there are certain companies out there which were, the early adopters of the cloud. And I wouldn't say that they had those documentations in the beginning. Those documentations were put in place as they were kind of, going through the journey. And I mean, these are the poster childs of, whether you talk about AWS and Azure and all of that. These companies who've been doing this for 5-6 years or more, now they have robust process in place. They have focus on documentation and all of that. But majority of the companies are still in very early stages. And from one thing I think Ty can answer better is that is security adequately staffed and trained to oversee the security aspects of this migration, which I have seen most of the companies I talk to, they don't have the resources.
No. And again, like as you're thinking about training your employees, it's not just the security practitioners that have to level up. The whole company has to. My time at Capital One Financial, we invested so much money from AWS of just training our humans on how to be architects, training our humans how to be engineers. There wasn't a lot of security content, but at the time, like I remember there were certain projects where, we would get engaged to say, how do we secure WordPress? And then that just went down so many different catalyst events to say, okay, are we choosing a secure hosting provider? Are we doing it ourselves? Are we leaving it to the engineers to do it? And figuring out who's on what base, who has the responsibility to do that, that in itself is an activity of documentation, because I don't think anyone really knows at that point, because that migratory path is not a clear path for every company. And I don't believe there's a clean blueprint that's presented itself in my 15 years of doing security, and really 10 have been focused on these migratory movements towards cloud.
So what I'm hearing from you, Ty, is each migration, and you just used the example of WordPress. That's a good example. When we say the cloud, I mean, it's really each application, each thing you're moving. Each time you do that, you're asking yourself a ton of questions. It changes your environment. And then this is, correct me if I'm wrong, where threat modeling comes in. It's like all of a sudden things are changing. What have we exposed? What have we fixed? I mean, am I sort of following this correctly? Archie, you're nodding your head. You go.
No, and that's correct. Look, at the end of the day, as you evolve, right, as you get more and more mature with the iterative process, well, now new questions pop up. And how do you answer those questions? So when you build a threat model, you start to understand the context. Mm-hmm. And there are always certain unknowns, unless and until you kind of have that architecture diagram in front of you. You know what your entry points are, you know what your exit points are, you know where the data is flowing, the access path, who has the permissions. Like all these questions, you get to see in front of you, and then all of a sudden you're much better prepared from a security perspective, as opposed to just having a checklist of like, hey, you got to do these 10 things and just be on your way.
So I want to get into the details of what threat modeling reveals that you wouldn't see otherwise. And I want to take this first to you, Ty. But before I do, I want to remind people that they have just over 5 minutes to get their bad ideas in if you want to get into the poll, because the poll will go up in just over 5 minutes. And also, at any time, go ahead and click on the link at the bottom of the screen to register for next week's. If you do it now, you're automatically entered in a raffle to win one of these awesome jackets. All right, Ty, let's just take one example of, and use anything. It could be the WordPress example. It goes, you started to go down the road of threat modeling. What did you see? You're like, oh my God, if I didn't do this, I would never have seen this kind of thing? Like, what was revealed to you?
For me, mobile application security in the early days. So I was around for the first iOS app while I was at JP Morgan Chase. I was there for the BlackBerry Storm app. And I can tell you, like, even manually testing those, like ethical hacking a BlackBerry Storm when the UI was not responsive was very painful. And then you're trying to use command line to get the things. When you get into the threat model, it's not just like you as a security practitioner figuring out all this magic. It's the conversation, it's the engagement. And I think what's magical, like I've known Archie for years, like once you start getting the visuals and you start mapping out the API endpoints, and everyone's like, what about V1 of that endpoint? What about V2? They're like, oh yeah, what about V0? And everyone's like, the hell is V0? They're like, well, we had a couple of betas and those partners and we never shut it down. And I'm like, nowhere is that in our Swagger file. Nowhere is that in our endpoint descriptions. How the hell is that thing still out there? And unfortunately, you usually find out on the back end of your incident response process when people are working their way around. So threat modeling for me is building that community and that conversation for everyone to share knowledge, because I think so many people always rely on either the architect to handle the security conversations with the security team, or the engineer kind of pops in that is actually doing the work, not the engineering team leader, not the VP of engineering, but the people actually writing code that say, well, have we thought about this? Because they hear something about security and now they start thinking of those misuse cases, those abuse cases. And that is where the magic in my mind comes in, because as a security player, I'm not going to know all that information unless I'm looking at all the lines of code. And if there's a million lines, I'm never going to get through it.
I want to quote something that Sandeep Campbell just said, and then he has a good question here. He said, and I'm going to throw this all to you, Archie. He said, once you move to the cloud, the current state will be inconsistent with policy enforcement, complex and disparate management consoles. So essentially, he's sort of yes-anding what I had said earlier, saying like, yeah, everything changes. You know, like there's this huge trickle-down effect. So he asks this question. He says, how would you handle monolithic architectures that don't perform at scale and security? So I guess that's what they are, and they're trying to go to the cloud. Have you, by the way, have you seen this before, Archie?
I've seen a lot of stuff, David. And one of my best exercise, and it's funny, and I'm sure your audience would relate, is when we were building this threat model for an application that they were migrating to the cloud. And they built this threat model, and they're like, yeah, everything is locked down and everything is good and all of that. And then all of a sudden, somebody pointed to another resource outside of what they were doing, actually had an open entry point to the environment they were setting up for this new application. And they didn't even realize that. So for them, they thought that, hey, it's all locked down and we don't need all of that security stuff, until they found out that there's another path coming into the same thing. And all of a sudden, you know, I mean, the things happen, but that's what it is. Now, to answer this thing, look, again, you know, it's a very high-level question from a monolithic application and all of that. But again, you know, unless and until we understand more about the context, what does the application do? Is it going to be open on the internet? Is it just a desktop application? Like, we need to know more to be able to, you know, talk intelligently about the security aspect. So, like, you know, I wish I had a better answer for him, but, you know.
Well, I know there's no unified answer here because, again, monolithic. But let me ask you, is the hurdle any different, or is it just, it's, you know, the bigger or more cumbersome you are, the more difficult it is? I mean, it just seems like the obvious, yes?
Oh, absolutely. And look, almost every company I've worked with is always like, they always start with lift and shift, right? So most of the companies slowly kind of say, hey, look, okay, you know, we're going to do cloud native and rewrite and whatnot. Some want to kind of, you know, go for the containerized model and all that. But almost everyone starts with lift and shift. So they want to take all the applications and just bring them to the cloud and just run it over there.
You were nodding your head here, Ty. What is the ugliest architecture I guess you've seen, or the most not willing to move? Let's say it that way.
Well, I don't think it's ever a willing to not move. I've actually not ran into that. I think it's more the unwillingness to document, unwillingness to like go and make things happen. And I think
I make that synonymous with not willing to move, but go on.
well, it's not that they're not willing. It's just the idea of having to do work that's from some crazy backlog from 5 engineers ago. Someone's like, well, that's not my problem. And then you hear it from the engineering manager, and then you hear it from the VP. And the VP is like, what do you want me to do? We don't have those tribal skills anymore. I'm like, you have the code. You should have hygiene. You should have comments. Where's the consistency? And those are really tough cultural discussions. And this is not in specificity to one place that I've worked at. This is every place in that past 10 years of there are teams that just say like, look, man, like we don't know how this code was written. We just maintain it now. And you're sitting there like, this architect has been here for 7 years. This product is 6 years old. This engineer has been here for 4. You're telling me you can't tell me where the API endpoints are. And like that is a common question of what is a documented endpoint versus not. And then from there, starting the migratory path of being more cloud native is like, let's start in a sandbox. Let's understand default deny. Let's understand least privilege. Let's start to understand what EC2s are, right? And sometimes that in itself is the chasm that has to be crossed. And what I've started to learn is kind of what we opened up with. Are we empowering our users to move, or are we just giving them a mandate to move to the cloud and to figure this stuff out on their own? And when you do that and you don't empower the team, it just leads to this toxic culture, because then your security team, that's usually, I'm a janitor. I clean up shit. That's what I do. I go in, I find the problems, I clean it up. My team does the same thing. We want to be champions. We want to empower the organization, but oftentimes we have to be the ones there when the milk is spilled and everyone's like, well, what do we do? Well, we have a process. Let's go. No one's going to get emotional. Here are the facts that we know. Here's what we're going to do. Here are the steps. And they're like, how are you doing this? It's like, well, we always have a plan. This is the same thing I'm going to go back to and say is, where's your documentation? Because that is the plan that allows us to then migrate faster. So yes, I mean, this is not news to anyone. As a security person, you just want to have information, artifacts, and details. So then you don't have to ask 50,000 questions and feel like you're wasting everyone's time.
All right.
And one thing I want to add to what Ty just said is that, when you start to look at all these complex applications that need to be migrated, which are, again, not documented, not many people know about it, ultimately what they end up doing is weaken up the security policies because, hey, we have to make it work and we just don't know, but we need to do this in order to make it work. And now let's get an exception. Let's get the security guys to agree to it, and then we'll figure out later.
I have a follow-up question for you, Archie, in just a second, but I want to remind people that our poll is live, and it'll be live for the next 7 minutes. So go ahead and vote, because we'll be playing our Department of Yes game coming soon. And if you haven't registered for next week's video chat, go ahead and click that link and do that now. Again, you won't be taken out of this one. Archie, we were talking about documentation earlier. Can any threat modeling be done without documentation? Like they go, we don't have anything. Let's get started. Like, can you do anything at that point? Or like, what your attitude is like, what do you want me to do here? What happens at that point?
Look, there's an easy answer and there's a difficult answer. So the easy answer is like, hey, we have no documentation. Let's just answer certain questions and, be on our way. But the difficult answer is what Ty said earlier. He would sit down with the team. He would ask questions. It is basically engaging them, involving them, getting as much details out. And when that starts to happen, it's not just that I'm focusing on the documentation. Hey, threat model itself becomes a documentation then. And it's not just your architecture diagram. Now it also understands the security aspects on top of the architecture diagram that you build based on that collaborative process of asking questions and putting that thing together. But very few people end up doing that.
By the way, I'm just seeing the good ideas are coming in. I forgot to mention, please, we want your good strategies regarding to this. So we don't want just bad ideas. We also want, you can still get bad ideas in because you're eligible for the best bad idea game, but good ideas and good strategies related to this. Ty, you were about to speak. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just typing stuff. I'm enjoying this conversation that's happening on the side channel here. I'm getting distracted easily.
Oh, it's all right. Well, here, we got some more questions to come in. Okay, Fred Grun asked this question. What are the challenges with keeping regional instances of your cloud app secure needed for, international data / privacy regulations? Ty, you're nodding your head. You've dealt with this?
This has been fun. Honestly, this has been a really cool learning experience, and I'm excited by challenges. And this is one where, not every cloud provider is the same. So let's always remember that. And going to the cloud, even in that conversation with me, sorry, my cat's acting a little wild. Knock something over here. 1 second. All right. When we look at different cloud providers, I would say 5 years ago, the game was very different. I think the gaps have closed a little bit. Now each cloud provider is offering some nuances, some speciality, but even security players have to be multi-cloud and multi-region as well. But when it comes to your business requirements, for my company, we offer a SaaS service. Some of these teams, some of these engineers, some of these executives that we're doing deals with, that I end up on calls with, they're like, our data cannot leave Germany. Our data cannot leave Sweden. And as a security player, you're like, how do you ensure that? Because like we can keep this in a region, but at the same time, like all the SaaS products that you're using, it's a very hard guarantee to make that your data staying in one place, because it's moving. It's moving through browsers. It's moving through APIs.
First of all, and I'm going to ask you a question you're probably not going to be able to understand, but I'm assuming these are obviously regulations, government regulations, but how is it possible for them to put a government regulation where they know that's not feasible, like per what you just said?
Okay, let's look at GDPR and making an IP address PII. Are you kidding me? How many of us have spoofed an IP address at least once in our life? How many people have spoofed a MAC address in their life? So this idea of legislation actually setting the tone for how we operate, and then there's the reality layer. And the reality later of like GDPR, it's still getting amended and changed. Same thing with CCPA, which is now CPRA. And give me another acronym that doesn't make sense, because every state in the US is going to have their own privacy laws. It's very tough to have that thing. And it was up above from Yodi. Not just in our executive tiers, but across the board, we need consistent taxonomy of how we're talking about problems. So that data governance and data sovereignty is very important in my mind. So having those conversations, where are your databases hosted? Cool. So where your databases are hosted, cool, they're in Sweden. You don't want your information leaving Sweden. We can give you this region. We'll host it there. But outside of that, our liability, our expression of our rights, how you're going to sue us if things leave, and how you detect it, which I don't know how you're going to do. Those are the terms. So I think that aspect of where is your information being created, where must it stay, and then doing your best effort. And I think that best effort, as long as it's legally defensible, like you're reducing the liability overall. But that one can be tough.
All right, I'm going to take this, Archie. Archie, I want to get into the specifics of actually conducting the threat model, and what's the best way to engage to get the best sort of bang for the buck. Like, how can I be most successful with threat modeling in a secure cloud migration? Let me set it up that way.
So I'll tell you, one of our customer is basically the case study that we built with them. So what they were doing is that they were doing threat modeling manually, because what they wanted to do was help developers build the architecture diagram, understand the security aspects, the entry points, the access paths, and everything, and then kind of apply the security policies and the security technologies and tools accordingly. And it helped them. So initially as they were doing it manually, but later on with our platform. But what it did was it gave developers a valuable knowledge and understanding of like why they're doing it. And all they had to do was just build the architecture diagram, and which you have to do it anyway, right? I mean, whether it's the development team that's doing it, whether it's the architecture team that's doing it, whoever is doing it, that's one piece of a document that everyone should have, and it should stay up to date. And as long as they can do that and apply threat modeling techniques to it, the developers are empowered to make security decisions themselves. And it speeds up the process of migration, because now you're not waiting on the security experts to pay and do that vetting exercise and then kind of give a go, no go kind of a thing. Ty, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, I mean, I love an architecture diagram. You know what else I really like is a data flow diagram. Because I think as we, we brought up privacy. We have some side channel chats about privacy, but really understanding your flows. And I think engineers really get this because it makes code development that much easier when you actually know what the data flow is and you're not leaving it for interpretation. I think the high level architecture diagram is a great starting place. And that's something Archie and I have always agreed upon. I want a baseline to know where my application is. And then when we start doing changes, when we're doing updates, when we're making mods, it's much easier to have a rapid conversation. And again, I'm going back to that previous point. Do I want to ask someone 50,000 questions when I know encryption's already handled by Redshift? If I'm already concerned around like some sort of shard encryption or some sort of encapsulation, like I'm not as concerned when we say, cool, it's in AWS versus, hey, it's still in our DC. It's relying on one-way SSL because that was always the exception that we had. And you're like, what are you even talking about? They're like, oh, this is well before your time, before you joined us. And I'm like, well, this is a terrible practice. How do we move away from this? And I think having that documentation allows for less surprises and less BS scenarios that we're all frustrated by that is just in the risk register in perpetuity.
All right, we have a call that just came in, but before I hit that, I just want to quote Patrick Benoit with CBRE, or Benoit, I'm sorry, Benoit is how you pronounce his last name. Interesting, he says, architecture diagram plus data flow diagram equals great understanding of your application. I like that. All right, call just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right, we are now going to be playing the Department of Yes. We have got a lot of bad ideas. And by the way, according to Andrew, this might be our record for good ideas as well. And I don't know if we'll have a record of bad ideas, but we definitely going to have a record of good ideas. All right, some truly horrible ideas have come in. And so this is the way it works. I'm going to read one of these bad ideas. I'm going to read actually two, and we're going to play this game, 2 rounds of this game. And you, Ty and Archie, have to explain why you actually want to do this without being facetious. That's the key thing. Find the value here. All right, I'm going to start with you. And actually, I think, by the way, in this bad idea, they are actually pointing out the benefits of it as well. Here we go. Starting with you. Starting with you, Ty. Migrate your workloads, data, etc., to a public cloud nobody has heard of. This will likely have some cost savings and security through obscurity. Why do you want to do this, Ty?
Well, let's discuss. I'm not opposed to this. I think this may be a good opportunity for the organization. It depends on the size of the company, too. There are product design partners where if you can get in early and have these discussions to build out the features, I'm all for it because you know what? You can build in security features, too. So I don't think it's unheard of to actually go down this path of unknown or some company that's starting and building a data source or database. I have these in real time too. So I'm very plussed on that one. I'm super.
I think he actually would do it.
Yeah! I would totally do it.
Archie, what do you say?
Oh, he actually answered his own question, security through obscurity. For me, that's perfect. When nobody knows about a cloud vendor, cloud service provider, they don't know how to hack them. So it's secure.
Well, not so much know to hack them. They don't become a common target. That's the thing, I think.
Well, that's the thing, right? Target or, lack of knowledge. So, how are you going to hack them? And besides, it's invisible now because, hey, nobody knows it.
Oh, yeah! Good answers, both of you. All right, we got a second one here. This one was our highest. Whoops, here, let me go back to the poll. This is our highest one. This one got 9 votes. All right, I'm going to throw this to you, Archie. Archie, you need to answer this one first. By the way, I don't see Archie. Can you see Archie?
Yeah,
I'm here.
Okay, this happened before where I don't see him, but everyone else sees him. Okay, make all business application cloud migrations the responsibility of the line of business heads. So let them decide which cloud provider to use and how to secure it. After all, they know their applications best. So each department head chooses their own cloud provider. Archie, why is this a good idea? Or why do you want to? It's a bad idea, but why do you want to actually deploy it?
Because now the business owners will actually embrace the concept of cloud migration because it's their favorite cloud service provider. And obviously they have connections there, so they can get the help from those cloud service providers to easily migrate and train their developers.
You're shifting the responsibility too. I like that. Bravo! Excellent. Ty, why do you want to do this?
You
What?
want to have every business leader as an owner in the deciding factor. In certain size organizations, we're talking isolation of cloud environments and less commingling with those lines of businesses. So we're actually looking at a better control matrix when it comes to large federal entities that come into your world that say, how can I pivot from here to here, and why can I go from like a treasury line of business to, a personal credit line of business? I'm actually pretty comfortable with this one. I would just be very tight with the finance team to make sure that from a budget standpoint, we know what we're getting into, because I think that's going to be the uphill battle for a lot of this. And when we went
Well,
through
they're worried about their own budget too. So it probably won't even hit your budget for that.
No. I'm going to have to get more money from their budget as well to make sure that we can afford all the security tooling, the management, the overhead, the people, and the support. So I'm very open to having this discussion. It's probably just going to be a very uncomfortable one when you see the number.
And to add to one thing what Ty said is a very, very good idea, that because now everything is isolated in their own cloud service providers, all the unintended API calls will not work anymore.
All right. By the way, I need to know, the first bad idea was Brian Colt, as I understand. Who gave this second bad idea? Let us know, because we want to bring you on in just 4 minutes. We're going to go to questions. I think we have a few more here. But yes, I want to know who gave that second one. Anyone speaking up for the second bad idea? Nobody's speaking up for it. All right. I'll throw this one to you, Ty, first. This comes from Yodi. How do you see infrastructure as code tools such as Terraform in facilitating cloud migrations and cloud operations?
I love it. I love Terraform. I love consistent build and baseline.
Explain to those who don't know. And I haven't played with this. Explain.
So this is interesting, because I think, as someone that's been in application and product security for the majority of my career, when it comes to the build or configuration phase of the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, knowing where you're starting your actual build from, of like how that configuration of service or server is going out there. Typically, it's a microservice. Sometimes it's a whole server or EC2 instance. You set the security group. You set who it can talk to. You can set if there's a Lambda that is connecting to you. You're setting like all the APIs. Like for me, sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. He's getting wild about all this cloud stuff too. He gets very excited. We see this opportunity where it just makes a lot more sense as a security player, as opposed to, hey, Archie, let's freestyle every build, and then I don't know where I'm starting from. I'm just choosing the default one from AWS, as opposed to the approved one, the blessed one, the thing that we're following. And actually, if you like certification accreditation, this is a fantastic touch point to say the security team has reviewed the Terraform as of 7/4/21.
All right. Do we still not know who put the second bad idea out? We still don't know. I was trying to scroll back up to figure out. It's Alton. All right. Can we bring Alton and Brian Colt on screen to defend their bad ideas, why they are the worst bad ideas? That's all the info I have. Alton. So is Alton actually there? Maybe Alton dropped off. That's also could possibly happen. We've had that happen, where someone who has a great bad idea, they drop off and they're no longer there. See if you can find Alton. And let's go to the questions. Actually, a few more came in right now, so let's take a look. This is a good question from Rick Woodward. And I'm going to throw this to you again, Ty, if you don't mind. What?
Alton is here. He's in the chat. He's here and accounted for.
He's here and accounted for. All right. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have you answer this question quickly, and then bring in Alton and Alton. Oh, there you are. Bring in Alton and also bring in Brian Colt. From Rick Woodward, how do you determine the business's appetite for new features gained by cloud migration versus maintaining old functionality? So how do you just make a rationale to do this? Ty.
I talked to product, and then I talked to R&D or engineering, and really we have that conversation together, because it's not going to be your CIO. It's not going to be your CEO. It's definitely not your CFO. And obviously, they manage the purse strings. But, from a real decision-making point, we have to be realistic about how many features we're shipping, what we're deploying, and how we're going to do it. I think that's something, if you leave for engineering to decide, it could just go all over the place. And I think that's something that you want to manage your velocity effectively around.
We have Alton. Alton, you've made it on. Our first time seeing you, Alton.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
so much for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
I'm hoping Brian Colt's coming on too in just a second. Brian is on the way as well. So here's how this is going to work. Alton and Brian will defend their bad ideas as being the absolute worst. There's Brian. Good to see you again. Brian, since you were the first bad idea, we want you to go first. So tell us, again, you're arguing for why yours is the worst, and Archie and Ty, you're going to determine the winner here. Brian, why is yours the worst idea?
Well, we all know security by obscurity is just a false sense of security. If you're on a little-known public cloud, they're still going to be able to find you. You may think it's reducing your attack surface, but it's really not. You're going to have something publicly exposed, and malicious actors will be able to find you in DNS anyway. So it's like a permeous layer.
Okay. All right. Good argument. All right. Alton?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed over the years in working with clients is the notion that the business just decides to go do things on their own, whether they are given permission to do so or not. As a result, the shadow IT thing has started to really wreak havoc on security organizations, because security organizations get blamed for things going wrong. One of the things that I've seen start to happen a lot more is this notion of business liaisons, where the business heads will have a liaison to security if they are being put in charge of this. But so far, I've seen a lot of disastrous situations where the business was just willy-nilly going after the cloud migrations with their applications and not really consulting with security. So,
well, we have a nice long
more
history.
bad outcomes than I have good ones. Let's just say that.
We have a long history of that. All right. Archie, Ty, which of these bad ideas do you think would cause the most havoc if you actually deployed it?
Havoc.
See, for
Is
me,
that the point?
definitely an unknown cloud service provider is worse than having business choose their own cloud service providers. But I mean, not to say that that's not a problem. That's going to have its own set of problems. But still, with
Well,
the
it's a
security
what's
team
worse game
managing
here. We're trying to find which is the worst of the two. Neither one are good. Ty, do you agree here or disagree?
If and only I can provide a menu of cloud providers to the business executives, because otherwise we're going to end up with the first example impacting the second example. So that's how I'm rolling. I think, the unknown provider or the unknown data provider, like that situation, there are too many question marks, because if it's, let's be honest, we've all been through this. There's two dudes in a van down by the river building software, and they want big company names and logos to help build that stuff. And sometimes it's just poorly architected. So I'm going to go with the first one.
All right, Brian, you win. Congrats to you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Brian.
Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank
for
you.
that. And by the way, the poll for the good ideas is up. Please vote for the good ideas. We have just about 17 minutes left. Two things to remind you of. Please, if you haven't done it yet, click on the link at the bottom of the screen to register for next week's video chat. And second, stick around to the end when we do our really fun meetup. If you've never done it, it is a ton of fun. And isn't that why you're all here, to have a good time and learn? You get to do both as well. All right, let's get back to our questions. This one for, I'm going to ask this of your customers, Archie. This comes from Richard Rushing, who I know is CISO over at Motorola Mobility. Cloud ownership. Who owns the cloud in your environment? Is it DevOps? Is it Cloud Ops? Is it Network Ops, application owners, etc.? I'm sure you're dealing with many companies. Who do you deal with?
We deal with mostly the security team, because
Okay.
whoever is migrating the applications is one aspect, right? At the end of the day, they all kind of roll into the CIO. But we work with the security team to make sure that all the proper controls are put in place. Developers are trained to understand the cloud and the cloud security aspect, build a threat modeling process in place, an automated threat modeling process in place to speed up the migration to the cloud by removing security as a barrier. So we partner mostly with the security team, the CISO team.
All right, Ty, what's your experience? Same thing? You're nodding your head?
Yeah, I think as you bring security, especially through like threat modeling touch points, it's usually going to be security. It's no different than anytime a word in my current realm and role, someone says something like vulnerability, security, or breach, I get pulled in immediately to talk to the customer. We have those conversations, and I'll be honest with you, half the time it's about security features like single sign-on, and I'm like, hey, this should have been a sales engineer as opposed to the CISO jumping in, because I can explain our program. I'm not here to break down like all the products and features. But when it comes to like Archie's world, I've been on the other end as his customer too. So yes, I think I'm going to be talking to Archie to deploy something like threat modeling. I don't know of too many engineers in my experience. I've had maybe a dozen that really get security, that truly understand, hey, this is going to make our life better if we have this documentation. This is going to make our life more secure if we avoid this by just having this readily available. And as you're scaling up as a startup, you want those starting points. And that threat model is a very powerful tool. It's no different than being in person through pandemic and having a whiteboard versus everyone trying to work through Zoom last year. And it was a struggle, even with all the virtual whiteboarding, that just didn't translate that well.
If you haven't voted for the good ideas, please do. I'm going to quote one right here. And again, if this is your good idea, please pipe up. This good idea seems like the path to take. And I'd like to know, Archie and Ty, if this is like, well, yeah, that's it in a nutshell, or what you would add to this. I mean, again, I know it's complicated, but this in the sort of most concise form, I kind of like the way this is written. It says, examine all existing business applications, whether to transfer, re-architecture, keep, replace, or terminate them, and evaluate for each group which cloud provider is best with respect to business and security requirements, then set up a migration plan. Is that in a nutshell right there? Or what would you add to that, Ty?
Ty, you want to go first?
Yeah, I feel like there's more, but it all just depends on your partnerships too. And that's also the larger business question. So even though there are
existing relationships.
Correct. Yes. There are clear providers, but there's also business dealings, and every partnership agreement when it comes to cloud providers, I feel like every company I've been a part of, that negotiation strategy leads to better business outcomes. You get any of the big cloud providers, you're going to have a technical account manager rotate every 90 days. And I will tell you, that's a pain point for all of us.
So this is more of maybe a greenfield type way of applying this. If you don't have all this stuff in place, yes, you could do all of this. Yes?
Yeah, but it's also a big undertaking. If you look at an organization like JP Morgan Chase, which has 50,000 or 100,000 applications through, most of the time, organizations don't even know which applications they have. Like, how are you going to go through that exercise? You can just look at your crown jewels and then kind of look at that. But then you go to the business and, hey, let's re-architect this, or, let's do this. And business would be like, well, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So they're not going to change that. So it's theoretically, it's a great idea because you have the option to press the reset button as you're migrating to the cloud. But in reality, it's not workable across the board.
Yeah, and right. I've had the legacy apps that will never move, and as a security practitioner, we're told to stand down often, especially if this thing is rendering hundreds of millions of dollars for X amount of customers, and they're never going away. And sometimes they're government entities. Sometimes they're just old, stodgy organizations that don't want to shift, and they don't need a cloud change. They don't want new APIs. They don't want new features. They want a flow of checks getting scanned, going in, money being moved, and they want a smooth process. And those change lead times can often dismantle that relationship. So the sensitivity around the business demand is a really important part. And again, back to partnership with your customers too. You as a security practitioner must understand the business impact.
All right, let's see what we've got here for. Oh, no, we asked that question. All right. So let me go back to, by the way, did we find out who had that good idea? I don't know. I didn't see whose that was. Please speak up if that was your good idea, because I want to give you full credit for that as well. Excuse me. We're coming to close to the end. We only have about 10 minutes left here. Let me just start with, what haven't we addressed, Archie, that we need to talk about that hasn't been asked in the questions with regard to migration? And mostly because maybe, one of the things we talked about before we did this was are people thinking about threat modeling when they're going to the cloud? So what are we not thinking about?
I'll go to the very first statement that Ty made, right? Education, like from the developers, to engineering team to your, business team, everyone should be educated on what exactly are they are going to do, right? So from a business point of view, they need to understand the business value of migrating to the cloud, whereas the development team needs to understand what is an EC2, where do I need a container, where do I need an EC2, where do I need a Lambda, like I need to understand that. I just can't be using things just based on my limited knowledge. And that kind of leads to the other problem. Like if I don't understand the cloud components, then how will I understand the security aspect of those cloud components?
Good. I'm throwing the same question to you, Ty. What going into this, to people who haven't even thought of threat modeling for this process, what do they need to know?
Outside of threat modeling, or be like deeper into threat modeling?
No. As part of threat modeling. No.
Well, I think as part of threat modeling, it's just having an open mind. Like, you're going to stumble across some really ugly, nasty stuff. And as a security practitioner, like, don't freak out. Don't say the sky's
Can
falling.
you admit to something crazy you saw in the process? Obviously not.
As Archie said, he's seen some stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff too. And, unfortunately, I signed these contracts that are a little different than Archie's contracts as part of my employment and then post-employment. So, no, I cannot share all those details. But as an example, at a high level, like, you're going to run into situations. Let's say test data is actually production or customer data. Like, things like that, you should not panic about. Like, write up your memo, draft the risk, go communicate with conversation, but don't immediately start flipping out in a meeting. Because you're like, how could I never have known this? How could the team not have been told this? This is unrealistic. Shut down that cloud environment, disable the security groups. Like, we have to go do our risk assessment before this business can continue. That's how you get fired, right? Like, that's how you lose your job as a security practitioner very quickly. Being pragmatic, also understanding some politics of your organization is a big part of this. So while you have a technical threat model, I'll be honest with you, I show threat stories or journeys as opposed to a threat model to my executive team. I'll take them through what-if scenarios just to allow them to understand. But that's a subset of the threat model. That's literally to say, hey, here's what we found. Here's what this incident was. Maybe we didn't have logging. This is where they could have pivoted. From that pivot, they could have gotten into this support system, or they could have got to this database. Here's what's in that database. Here's what could have been impacted. And while I can talk dollars and cents and metrics and money and all that other stuff, I go for feeling. I go for feeling and trust and empathy. And I want people to pick up on that EQ. If we don't have that conversation to say, let's think about all this crazy stuff you're seeing in the news now. Solar winds, pipelines, these supply chain attacks that people are now freaked out by. Like, the media is just picking up more of it. Now, have they been happening before this? Absolutely. Did it have the amount of visibility in the news cycle with it? No way. I think the big lesson learned for me in the past times is, like, when vulnerabilities or CVEs get like little logos like Heartbleed, the world and the surges around security change drastically. But right now, I think you have to humanize it and understand the audience you're talking to. So while that technical threat model will help the discussion, you still need to extract. And that's the executive in you, the person inside of you that has to rise from just the technical engineer. And there isn't a clear roadmap, because sometimes you have technical leaders, but at the same time, you have to make it human readable. And I'll go back to Yodi's point. You got to have a good taxonomy.
All right. So something that we talked about, Archie, at the beginning, and I don't think we really have addressed this, is that the speed the threat modeling have happened, because cloud migration can be long and painful. And really kind of we saw it at the very beginning of like all the questions, all the things that surprise. Walk me through and us through what is happening in threat modeling that can speed this up.
So, look, let's take a look at if you have a threat model, right? Now, a threat model can cater to different audiences, as Ty said, right? You have a different kind of output for your developers. You have a different kind of output for your architects, different kind of output for your red teams, and different kind of output for your executives, right? Because from an executive perspective, they're only focused on like, what are the 10 things I need to worry about, or what are the 5 things I need to worry about. They don't have the bandwidth to look at, every small problems. But with threat modeling, one of the things, like, as you get your development teams to build threat models for the applications that they're migrating to the cloud, all this data can feed into that. So like as Ty said, hey, look, one of the top 5 things is encryption. Well, let's put together an encryption strategy enterprise-wide so that we don't have to worry about it going forward. My devs don't have to worry about it going forward. They can just plug it in and we're good. But from a dev perspective, they understand the context, what the architecture looks like, and the exact controls that they need to put in place. They're not security people, right? So if we can give them tools and technologies that can automate the process for them, and the security guys can take the intelligence that they have and put that into the platform, which can then filter down to the devs. And so now you're removing security as a blocker. You don't have to kind of wait on an approval from them all the time, but at the same time you're giving the tools and technologies to the developers so that as they are migrating to the cloud, they've been given that guidance and that help to focus on the security as well. And so overall, not only are you securing the journey to the cloud, but you're also speeding things up.
Very good. All right, we are now wrapping up the show. This is what I want to do. We've got 4 minutes left exactly. So let me wrap this up. And while I'm doing wrapping this, showing you these final few slides here, Andrew, would you change the link at the bottom for us? All right, let me remind everybody that next Friday is Hacking Purple Teaming. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to actually have someone from PlexTrack and also from Customs and Border Control as well, talking about purple teaming. So this will be a really fun conversation. That link at the bottom no longer goes to that, so you'll have to go to CISOseries.com and click the register for video chats button. Remember, if you register for early, you are automatically entered in a raffle to win a jacket. All right, next, stick around for our meetup. That is what that link is turned to in the bottom. So you can go ahead and click on that now. Go ahead and register, log in, and join us for the meetup. It's a lot of fun. 5 conversations with another random security professional in just a half an hour, actually less than 30 minutes. And tell all your friends to join us. We do this every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be moving, so I'm going to take a week off for that, and I'm going to take a week off for Black Hat. But otherwise, except for those 2, we're back on. So if you would like to do one of these, first of all, Threat Modeler, I have to thank you, Archie, for sponsoring this very video chat. Check them out at threatmodeler.com. If you have questions about this, please contact Archie and Threat Modeler. Just contact them right there. Or join us in the meetup. You may get a chance to chat with Archie. Do you want to sponsor a video chat yourself? Guess what? I think starting August 24th, we have our first availability. So if you're interested in that, just email me at david@cisoseries.com. All right, we have just 2 minutes left. I will start with you, Archie. 1 minute summary. Explain what you would like everybody to know and any way that they should contact you.
Oh, so we at Threat Modeler, we have this automated threat modeling platform. Mm-hmm. It actually speeds up the process of threat modeling and takes the burden away from your devs. And you can reach out to us either at threat.com, send an email to me at archie@threatmodeler.com. We can walk you through the process. We can help your dev team make sure that they are doing the right thing from a security perspective as they help the organization migrate to the cloud quickly and securely.
All right, great. Archie@threatmodeler.com. Email him there. But stick around. Click on the link at the bottom. Join us for the meetup. All right, 1 minute. Ty, any thoughts, advice you give to our audience?
Thoughts and advice. Definitely think about threat modeling. I've got an old presentation out there. It's on like slideshare.net. Around hacker stories. So, I think there is a place for tools, that there is a place for rapid discussion. I think in the startup realm, you definitely want to have that human experience. So getting educated yourself, number one, is a big part of this journey. So just saying threat modeling is not a threat model. You have to really understand the context and be aware and understand how are you going to use that as a vehicle and a mechanism. Outside of that, if you have follow-up questions, hit me up on LinkedIn, just first name, last name, Ty Spano. I suck on Twitter. Don't tweet at me. But yeah, LinkedIn is the way to go for me.
T-Y, and the last name S-B-A-N-O. You can find him.
Thank you.
He works for CISO. He's the CISO over there. And I want to thank you again, Archie Agarwal, who's the CEO over at threatmodeler.com. Check them out there. All right, everybody, click that link at the very bottom of the screen. Meet us over the meetup. I'll be there. I have to move some lights around, but I'll see you there in just a few seconds. And I want to thank everyone who joined us and our guests, and also Andrew, the producer in the back, making this all happen. Take us out, Andrew.